Why does God need to command humans to kill other humans? Isn't God meant to be all-powerful? Also, what benefit does a few hundred dead humans even impact God? None of this makes any sense. And you're absolutely right. This is a very simple, yet I think really profound question. Sometimes when questions are so obvious, they can seem like, well, Christians have addressed that, so it's not a good argument. Wrong. This question has a combination effect of divine hiddenness with the problem of evil. And yes, if we go down either of those roads, it gets pretty tedious and pretty long to get through all of the excuses. And so I like the framing of it this way, where we look at just a specific act and say, now wait a second, why does God do it like this? To which, of course, the first Christian answer is, because he can. Because who are you to say he can't? Because why do you think you understand the mind of God? Because he wants to inject his justice through his creation and all of these other things, and we're going to get to some of them. But I want to start by making a simple point. First of all, just to be clear, God absolutely does command humans to kill other humans, according to the Bible, at least. And if this whole God is with the U.S. and telling the U.S. to do what they're doing to Iran to bring about Armageddon so that we can get to Jesus, if that's all true, I don't know that it is yet. If there's confirmed sources on that, I'd like to make a video there. But if it were true, it's actually the perfect example. And there's been enough true cases in history of people saying or even actually believing that they heard from God to do violence. That's the simple answer. God's not real. That's why humans have to kill other humans, because there's no God to do it, but they get their power by saying God told them to. I mean, that is the 1-minute video answer here, but it's a comment deep dive episode. So back to what I was saying, we absolutely have circumstances in the Bible of God commanding humans to kill other humans. I want to make sure that's very clear. I'll list just a couple I pulled. Deuteronomy 20:16-17, you shall not leave alive anything that breathes. You shall completely destroy them. 1 Samuel 15:3, now go and attack Amalek and utterly destroy all they have. Do not spare them, but kill both man and woman, child, and infant. Joshua 6:21, they devoted to destruction by the edge of the sword all in the city, both men and women, young and old. Those are not stories where people misunderstood God. Those aren't stories where a commander gave an order and this is just a description with no moral assignment. These are all, and there's many more, direct commands of the biblical God Yahweh to humans to end other humans' lives. So first we establish that, yes, God actually, according to the Bible, commands this. But then we also have God doing his own dirty work. That's also found in the Bible multiple times. Look at the flood. Look at Sodom and Gomorrah. Look at when David is being punished for taking a census and God sends an angel that kills 70,000 men and had to be stopped, by the way, by God for going overboard. No humans required for massive human death. So biblically, what do we know so far? We know that this God has no problem ending human life in general, whether it's generational punishment or collective punishment or even justified punishment, because I think the first two are not. This God, in numbers small or large, think striking Onan dead for spilling his seed, that's one murder, or think the entire flood, which is all the murder except for 8, and everywhere in between. So the first part of the question is, why use human involvement at all? And if you're being obtuse about this, you might say, well, what's the difference? Who cares? God's ways are right, and so if that's what he wants, if he needs this person or this people group to be killed, who cares if he chooses to do it himself by divine hand or send an angel or send a human? Well, I bet the humans care. And so if it's all the same to God, if it's just about getting this end result of these people are so evil they need to be wiped out and all the other stupid Christian arguments about tribal warfare that don't recognize it is just tribal warfare. It is biased. It is a chosen people being good and everyone else being bad. It is rules for me, but not for thee. Is that the phrase? Rules for thee, but not for we? I don't know. It all works. Now, I know that Christians like to think, and some probably actually believe, that God prefers or needs to, or whatever weird word you want to insert for an all-powerful God, to use humans as agents of justice. Now, when you really zoom out, if you really believe what Christians try to convince you to believe about how big God is, how worthless we are, asking or commanding humans to go kill other humans, knowing some of the effects it's going to cause the humans, we're going to get into that, when you could snap your fingers and do it yourself. And it also, you're not trying to hide. Like all of these Old Testament biblical examples, hell, even in the New Testament, when he smites Ananias and Sapphira, he's not trying to hide the fact that he's in this world and can do things. So if you're going to some excuse of, well, he needs to protect people's free will by not being too obvious with his signs and wonders, what? Have you read the Bible? That might sound like a good excuse to you in the modern day for about 2 minutes if you don't think about it at all. But saying this God can't show up too often or won't do big things because it interferes with free will means you have a total lack of understanding of your God in a biblical sense. So here's the funny analogy I thought of. If I had like an ant farm, my creation, I've made their home. I didn't create the ants, but I've put them together. It is for me. Without my witness of it, it might as well not exist in my selfish purview. And I see that one group of ants is utterly evil, or we'll just say there's even better justification. They've gotten a disease. And if they not just get next to, but like breed with this other group of ants, they're going to spread the disease. And so me as creator, as observer, I deem it necessary for these ants to die. Tell me, in what world would it make sense for me to try to reveal myself and my will to the small group of ants who aren't going to understand my ways anyways because they're so much higher, nor can they comprehend my thoughts because they're so much higher. But I'm going to task them on penalty of their own destruction to test, to see if they will obey me. And even though they understood at one point all ants are the same, ants are just ants, they've been convinced by the religion of me as God, as owner, as observer, that these other ants are evil and deserve to be wiped out, and that it is up to them, otherwise they are not fulfilling my will to go and kill the ants. Now, would that be insane considering my proportional omniscience and omnipotence compared to the ant, where I could just divide the farm in half? I could separate them. I could drown them in my own little flood. I could spray them with something that kills them instantly, being smited. I don't have to involve the other ants at all, unless I want to. There's no other good rationale for why it would be necessary to command an ant to go kill a baby ant over here when I'm the one that wants the baby dead and I'm the one that can do it with no collateral damage. So if you were a Christian watching thinking this is all silly and stupid and who are you to question God, answer that question. What is the actual benefit in God's desire, in God's plan, or for the human for God to make them? Make them is what it is. It might be a request. You might call it even a command. But if they don't do what God has specifically said, they are disobeying God. They are in sin. They are damned. Would you not agree, Christian? And then you bring in some other problems, one being moral responsibility. If a person kills someone because God commanded it, if that's really what they believe, who is morally responsible for the killing? The person or God? You might say both, and I would actually agree with you there. So all you've done is you've brought another person in to be morally culpable here. Well, who cares, Brandon? It's a just thing if God requires it, and so it doesn't matter. In fact, if you really want to get sick, the moral thing is to obey God. And so it's actually more moral now to go kill the human than if you didn't. And that is the sickness of religion. That right there is how millennia of justified harm has happened. It would be bad. I would be morally accountable, except God told me, and so it's not. And in fact, I'm actually the good guy. It really is that simple. That is the answer to the generalized question. Why does God have humans do his dirty work? Because there is no God, and it's all human dirty work, but it gives them a special pass. It enables them special privileges. Period. End of story. Now, if you're still thinking, well, that's still just you saying you would prefer something than the other. But again, if it's up to God, it's all good anyways. Can we agree that even if God commands one, unless you're just a total psychopath, a human having to take the life of another human is not of zero consequence psychologically? In fact, let's hold on the psychological aspect for a second, and let's get to the related harm when you make humans who are less perfect than you, who are fallible, do your dirty work. Say that all those Old Testament justifications are true, and there's evil men that are doing evil things in this group over here. And maybe you're progressive enough to not believe in collective punishment. And you can see that some of the women who are married to them because they were captured in some other battle, and their children, some 2-year-old female, as an example, would be completely innocent. Well, when you send humans to attack, you might get some of that collateral damage where women and children are being harmed. In fact, it's straight up guaranteed if Yahweh has sent you on this mission, because he often says to kill all. And we have great reason contextually to know that it's not hyperbolic. But even if it was hyperbolic and it means utterly destroy the actual enemy, we know that in war with humans, you get collateral damage. How evil of a God would you have to be to send a weaker, lesser, fallible individual to do your dirty work, knowing it will, because you have perfect foreknowledge, knowing it will result in the death of X amount of innocent children or women, when again, you have the power to snap your fingers and get the death, the immediate death, the painless, immediate, non-psychologically damning, non-collateral damage, strike down death of particular individuals. There doesn't have to be all of this destruction, not just to the collateral damage of people, but even to things, cities that get burned to the ground. What a waste of resources. What a waste of people's time and energy. How many poor will starve in a kingdom that's just been destroyed while the new king is erecting statues and fixing the walls? I don't think you can convince me that God is all loving and all just for all people when we know he's capable of smiting exactly who he wants dead and is willing to do so, but sometimes chooses to make lesser beings, humans, do his dirty work. That's what I mean. This question seems simple, but I think it's actually incredibly profound. Oh, and I forgot to mention it. Between humans and buildings and society, you get the death of countless other animals. Again, so unnecessary. No matter how you split it, the involvement of humans creates additional suffering. Straight up warfare, the brutality that humans kill each other with, the trauma of witnesses that are left alive, again, of the individual that has to do the killing, cycles of revenge. When you command one group to kill another and their friend group now wants to retaliate on you, you're only causing that additional harm and contention when, again, if God did it or made it look like a natural disaster or a tornado comes and perfectly picks up only all the bad people, the easiest thing in the world for God to do. But no, he's going to do this that creates all of this additional harm. And then yes, also, let's get to the psychological harm for humans. Imagine believing in a God, really believing, really following him, and being told to kill a child, being told to commit genocide, being told to take the leftover virgin girls as wives. It's easy to just group all these men, these warriors together as these evil people doing these evil things at the excuse of their God. But if this God were real and they were just being obedient to divine command theory, even though it's a horrendous excuse of just following orders, it would at least be the most justified following of orders because it's God. But a God who would put that upon feeble human psyches, knowing the harm that it would do, would be unjustified and immoral. Now, many of these soldiers are completely on board. That doesn't mean they won't suffer psychological harm after the fact. It just means that at the current state, they are so heavily indoctrinated and really believe that their violence is now justified, which, see before we covered, is a horrendous outcome also. That's how you get holy wars. That's how you get the Crusades. That's how you get religious persecution, by the way. Again, it goes back and forth. And all the other colonial conquest we've had at the name of God on high. But there's always the truth. And the truth is that the Israelites, the people at that time, the people writing these books, they're just like all their neighbors and all the other people around earth. They frequently claimed, God told me to X, because it gave their desire, their murder, their war legitimacy, because it made it unquestionable, because it added moral justification, because it sowed unity among the people. It is a very effective tool. This pattern is everywhere in the ancient world and not so ancient world. So it's very clear to me that these stories reflect human societies that were attributing violence to God's plans. I think that's mainly what I wanted to cover. There was a second part to his comment that what even would it matter to a God if a few hundred humans die here or there? And yes, sometimes the numbers are reported to be much larger than that. But he's right. For people that constantly claim how big and impossible this God is to understand or to know, they sure seem to have no problem zooming in and saying, well, yeah, but these 300 people needed to be smit with fire. Smited? I don't know. But Elijah called down that fire and hey, it came. Was that really necessary? Was that the only way this all-powerful, cool God could think to deal with the problem? Humans are temporary. This God is timeless, but he's supposed to be concerned with our little 70 to 120 years. Civilizations rise and fall. He's essentially experienced all of it all at once anyways, but we're supposed to believe that he is concerning himself over territory disputes in the Levant 3,000 years ago? How little do you think of your God? Well, Brandon, how dare you? Don't you understand? He had to establish this chosen people, and he didn't want to interfere with free will. Wink, wink. And so, he just commanded his chosen people to kill the non-chosen people and then magically helped make sure they always won when he wanted them to. Sometimes he would punish them with losing. Yeah, lots of free will. Sorry, these conflicts, these ways of going about things, they look very human, very fallible, very petty, very silly and ridiculous for a perfect, timeless being of utter majesty. It is so clearly the simpler answer here that there is no God, and man uses God like every Christian believes every other man is doing. When you read the accounts of the Akkadians saying their God wanted them to win this battle, do you believe it? What about when the Egyptian pharaohs said the same thing? How about the Greek generals who claimed to have divine backing? Do you believe them? No. But when it comes to Israel or America and Yahweh, all of a sudden, that is for sure? I only see you with three options here. You can either believe that God demands humans to do these violent things to each other, in which case, see all the very serious moral issues that I've already brought up about that. Or you can believe that humans misunderstood a very real God about his desires, and all of this recording of what God said to do in the Bible and what battle happened and who killed who and who took whose land is just incorrect. Yeah, you still believe in the Christian God, but not one who would ever do that. Well then, first of all, what is your basis for anything else you believe if you're going to discredit the majority of the Bible? But also, if you were right, how inept would your, again, all-perfect God be at communication to get it this wrong so often and not intervene to correct? Which just leaves option 3. No God required. Humans do this to each other and attribute it to God for all the special privileges it gives. So no, if you thought that Mike's question here was trivial or silly or easily excused by Christian apologetics, I think you're dead wrong. And I'd love for you to explain to me, specifically with what I've shared here today, where I'm wrong. So that's it. I hope to see you Sunday with a new video. And until then, keep thinking.